Conversations don't suddenly die for no reason. They collapse because the energy changed, and one person either stopped building, stopped caring, or stopped knowing what to do next. That's the first thing you need to understand. If a conversation starts strong and then falls apart, the problem usually isn't random. Something shifted. Someone pulled their energy back. Someone stopped carrying the moment. And if you don't see that shift early, you'll keep blaming silence on bad luck instead of seeing what actually killed the conversation. A strong start means almost nothing by itself. That surprises people. They think a good beginning proves connection. It doesn't. A strong start can come from excitement, novelty, chemistry, good looks, or just the fact that both people were switched on for a moment. But starting strong and staying strong are not the same skill. A lot of people know how to begin. Far fewer know how to build. And that is where conversations usually start breaking. First, people kill conversations when they stop rewarding what was just said. That is one of the fastest ways energy dies. Someone says something, and instead of building on it, the other person gives a flat answer, changes the subject badly, or gives nothing back. No curiosity, no tension, no emotional return. And once that happens a few times, the conversation starts losing oxygen, because conversations do not survive on words alone. They survive on response. And here's the part many people miss. The next mistake is even worse because it sounds normal on the surface. Second, people ask dead questions. Not every question keeps a conversation alive. Some questions shut it down while pretending to keep it going. What do you do? Where are you from? How was your day? These are not evil questions, but if they are asked with no edge, no play, no emotion, and no follow-up, they create flat energy fast. That's when a conversation starts feeling like an interview instead of a spark. And once it feels like work, people mentally leave before they physically leave. Third, people feel the pressure to be interesting, and that pressure kills presence. This is where the whole thing gets more brutal. A lot of conversations die because one person stops being in the moment and starts performing. They start trying too hard, trying to impress, trying to sound smart, trying to prove value. And the second that happens, the energy gets tighter, flatter, heavier. Because real conversation has movement, performance has tension, and people can feel the difference faster than most realize. A classic example is someone talking too much about themselves because they think being impressive creates attraction. It usually doesn't. It creates distance. If you keep turning the moment back to your story, your theory, your world, your perspective, the other person stops feeling seen. And once that happens, the energy starts collapsing even if the words keep going. But even that is not the deepest problem. Fourth, some people stop engaging the moment there is nothing easy left to say. At the start, the conversation is light, easy topics, fast reactions, low risk. But then comes the moment where someone has to take the next step. Say something more personal, more playful, more real, more specific. And instead of doing that, they retreat into safe, forgettable talk. That is where conversations often collapse. Not because there was no potential, because no one had the courage or skill to deepen it. And this is exactly why so many good starts go nowhere. Fifth, people kill energy when they answer without opening a door. That matters more than people think. A good conversation is not just answer, answer, answer. It is answer and invitation, answer and disu and expansion, answer and something to grab onto. Flat people close loops, interesting people open them. That is one of the clearest differences. And if you keep talking to someone who only closes loops, the energy will die no matter how strong the beginning felt. This is also where another mistake shows up fast. Some people hear emotion and rush straight into solving. The other person shares something personal, and instead of entering the feeling, someone jumps in with advice, fixes, or explanations. That often sounds helpful, but in early conversation, it can kill the spark. Because people do not feel close when they are managed. They feel close when they feel understood. Sixth, sometimes the conversation dies because one person was never really invested. They were just temporarily available. This one hits hard because it forces people to stop romanticizing a good start. Sometimes the energy was high because the timing was right. They were bored, they were lonely, they wanted distraction, they liked the attention, they were in a social mood. But that is not the same as real conversational investment. Temporary energy fools people all the time. They think, we had something. Maybe you had a moment. That is not always the same thing. If you're tired of reading people wrong, subscribe. That's exactly what this channel is for. Now here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Seventh, a conversation often dies before the words die. That's the shift people need to learn to see. The eyes change, the timing changes, the face changes. The body stops leaning in, the reactions get thinner, the pauses get heavier. The words may still be there, but the energy is already gone. That is why you should stop listening only to what people say. Start watching what the conversation feels like, because the collapse usually happens emotionally before it happens verbally. Eighth, some people talk too much without creating tension. This sounds unfair, but it is true. More words do not mean more connection. Long explanations, too much detail, rambling stories, too much self-focus. These things can drain energy fast when there is no rhythm, no curiosity, no emotional contrast. A strong conversation breathes, a dead conversation drags. And once it starts dragging, people stop feeling pulled in. That is when you see the collapse. And there is another version of this mistake that people keep romanticizing, bringing in too much heaviness too early. Too many problems, too much emotional dumping, too much unresolved weight before real trust exists. Depth is attractive. Emotional flooding usually isn't. There is a difference between being real and making the other person carry your emotional weather too early. Ninth, some people are waiting to be carried. This kills more conversations than people admit. They want connection, but they do not contribute to it. They want chemistry, but they do not create any. They wait for the other person to entertain, lead, rescue, revive, and rebuild the moment. And when both people do that, the conversation dies right there, because energy needs leadership. Not domination, not performance, leadership. Someone has to notice the drop and shift the tone, the topic, the depth, or the playfulness. And when no one does, the conversation collapses under its own passivity. 10th, the real reason conversations collapse is that most people notice the drop too late. That's the hardest truth. The problem is often not the collapse itself. The problem is that people keep talking in the same dead way after the energy has already fallen. They do not pivot. They do not sharpen. They do not deepen. They do not revive. They just keep going and hope the energy comes back on its own. It usually doesn't. That is why conversations start strong and then collapse. Not because the beginning was fake every time, but because good starts are cheap and real conversational skill only shows when the easy energy runs out. So stop worshiping strong starts. Watch what happens after the first spark. Watch who builds. Watch who opens doors. Watch who stays present. Watch who notices the drop, and who just lets the whole thing die. That's the difference between a conversation that had momentum for a minute and a conversation that actually had depth. And here's the question I want to ask you. What kills conversations faster? Low curiosity, performance, fixing too quickly, or waiting to be carried. A strong start can fool you, but a collapse reveals the structure underneath it. Real connection does not just start with energy. It survives the moment when the energy needs to be rebuilt. And if you've ever stood there wondering how to start a conversation in the first place without sounding forced, awkward, or try hard, watch this next. I'll show you how to approach someone without being awkward.